exciting stuff. And I think people struggle to find anything online where you've been wrong. But Frans, load shedding. I think it's been almost 2 decades now. How do we still have load shedding? How is the state incapable of solving this problem?
It's the same reason why SAA didn't work out and why many municipalities, if you read the most recent stuff from the Auditor General again, are a bit of a disaster. It's an approach to management that sees the removal of competent people and their replacement with people who are less competent, and then the pursuit of the extraction of wealth in order to feed cadre deployment networks. That's the formula, 3 steps. And wherever you apply that formula, you are going to have a poor result. And that's what happened at Eskom as well. The trend line on Eskom, none of this should come as a surprise to anyone. The trend line on Eskom's production of electricity, there's a number that electricity people use called the energy availability factor. And it measures what proportion of potential of installed capacity is actually put out into the economy as electricity. And I don't know, 10 or 15 years back, the figure for Eskom was over 80%. So of all the power plants that Eskom had, about 80% of that potential energy was actually produced and went into the economy. The rest had broken down or was down for maintenance. So it's 80%, 10, 15 years ago. The figure today, I think, has now slipped to under 60%. And it's pretty much a straight line. And that straight line tells you where things are headed. We have installed capacity today, that's potential, I think, in Eskom, about just over 40,000 megawatts. We've got production of just under 25,000 megawatts. I just sort of speak off the top of my head here, but it's close enough. Here's an amazing number. My estimate of this data that I followed very closely, and I mean the electricity production trend lines for well understood, is that by 2040, if South Africa wishes to aspire to be a high growth emerging market, so economic growth rate of around 5% sustained, the generating shortfall is going to be 40,000 megawatts or thereabouts. It is bigger than the entire generating actual production figure, the availability figure that we see today. To address that, we need to commission an additional 40,000 megawatts over the next 20 years, ideally starting this morning. Doing that with regard to 2 sources of electricity. One is about 20,000 megawatts of wind and solar that run in the day, but storage is difficult and expensive. And behind that, this is a new idea. South Africa needs to become the global pioneer of small modular reactor technology. These are small nuclear reactors, much smaller than anything that has to date been thought of as a nuclear power plant. They are an amazing technology. Russia is the global leader in this. It's a 50-year-old technology in Russia. It comes out of old Russian icebreakers. The first commercial Russian small modular reactor is at Pevek on the East Siberian sea. It floats on a barge. And a Russian gold miner has just commissioned 4 of these things. Hitachi, Toshiba, and Rolls-Royce are amongst Asian Western firms that are pioneering this kind of technology. And what makes it so compelling is that the reactors can be built off-site and shipped to be installed. By the end of this decade, production time from construction to installation should be as short as 36 months. The reactors have fail-safes and the like, which mean that they are extremely safe. and do not need the same fallout or containment safety sort of measures that might apply to traditional nuclear reactors. They can be retrofitted into existing power plants. So a coal plant could be retrofitted with a small modular reactor. They can be set up in series so that they you're able to scale delivery. They can be hooked into microgrids. So in distant rural communities or cities might commission them directly, and you don't necessarily have to pay for them either. If you are able to agree to take off agreements with providers who install them then on what's called the BOO principle, build, own, and operate. So the reactor provider builds it, installs it, sets it up, and runs it for 20 years without any capital outlay from the South African government authority or a city, based on a takeoff agreement that the power will be bought at a certain rate. If we become the global pioneer in this kind of technology, because it's perfectly suited to South Africa, then matched with 20,000 megawatts of solar and wind, we have a good way. We will by 2040 have the energy infrastructure to sustain very high levels of economic growth.
Yeah, great. That sounds fascinating. I hope the climate change fanatics don't try to put an end to that. But Frans, what I don't understand is, I mean, you can literally see the results. The government can literally see the results of their policies in terms of electricity. I mean, the other things might be indirect, but they can see the lights are not working. How is the ideology so powerful? How does a person not try to think, okay, we need to try something else. This is not working.
This is the best question. And I'll tell you the answer. It's absolutely understood. In private, if you brief senior officials of the government or the ruling party, they're devastated by Eskom, devastated by low growth, the absence of investment, fearful, terrified of the political consequences. Absolutely true. The idea that these are morons, they don't understand the problem, they can't see why. Someone must tell. A lot of business people tell me, can't you tell the government that this is very bad? I say they understand it better than you. Much better than you, because it's so real for them. But they persist with it regardless. If you understand that and have no trouble with grasping and holding that view, and don't feel that you have gone mad, no one can think like this. If you can grasp the view, you're very well positioned to anticipate what comes next for South Africa. It's the story of the scorpion and the frog that sits on a river bank. And the scorpion says to the frog it wants to cross to the other side, and can the frog give it a lift on its back? And the frog says, no, you mad, you'll sting me and I'll die. And the scorpion says, no, but think this through. If I sting you and you sink, I'll drown. It makes no sense. And the frog says, well, that actually, if you think about it that way, you're right. So the frog says, well, hop on. And halfway across the raging torrent, the scorpion stings the frog, and the frog says, what the hell was that? And the scorpion says, I'm a scorpion, and that's what scorpions do. And if at this point you still are unable to understand what the ANC does, then I think you're going to have a very hard time anticipating what comes next. And that is the answer to your very important question, because it's on that question and the inability to understand the answer that so many observers of South Africa, investors or the like, remain often confused at the events around them. Grasp that, confusion disappears, and the road to seeing what comes next becomes very, very clear.
Yeah, no. I understand the problem. I understand the ideology. I've even interviewed Rob Davis, the former Minister of Trade and Industry, and it's just it's just so fascinating for me, that sort of cognitive dissonance. You see the problem in front of you, but you can't seem to understand. You need to try something different. I mean, it's just that capitalism is so a demon in their eyes, in their minds. They can't for one moment consider it.
But you're asking someone to do a very difficult thing. It's almost an article of faith, ideology, and what you believe in, because it's about the values that you believe are good and right and just. And what you're asking is you're asking people who grew up believing in something to admit that everything they have dedicated themselves to was wrong, and that they need to surrender all of that and embrace the ideas that they regarded as those of their rivals and adversaries. And it's a hard thing to do. For many people, just too hard, because it's not just a simple ideology. These aren't flippant beliefs. These aren't lightly held. These are deeply held, value-driven, and the conflict between that and the facts on the ground and the consequences of those facts bring about the kind of paralysis and results that we see in the country around us now. This is how you can have the what will become one of the classic Ramaphosa sort of positions: expropriation that brings about more investment, or higher wages in a country where the skills base fails to improve, that brings about more demand for employment. This is how we're going to have an austerity program and a sovereign wealth fund at the same time. And when you begin to see the pursuit of such against mutually annihilating ideas, what you are actually observing is a very deeply held ideology running into an increasingly deeply held fear of the consequences of the facts as they can be observed by the politician. And the way that plays out is that the confusion and internal inconsistencies deepen and accelerate to the point of the demise of the government or the political party that held those contradictions in its efforts to govern the society around it.